We're thrilled to have returning to the show writer and baseball analyst with TSN and Blue Jays insider Scotty Mitchell. Welcome back to the Walk-Off, man. Thanks for taking the time.
Thrilled. You've lied once already.
Well, it is what it is. I'm just happy that you last minute jumped on board with this. It's great, bud.
Hey man, it's January in Toronto. The sun hasn't been out in literally a month, so I got all the time for you need right now.
Perfect. I know I mentioned this before we started here, but I'll say it again. Every year you do your top 50 prospects in the Blue Jays system, and I look forward to it every year. You're thorough, you deep dive into it. You mention guys that I've never heard of and can start to follow and get excited about, and start DMing and bothering them to come on the show. So you're a big part of this that you don't even know, man. So great job and thanks again. Yeah.
Hey man, I appreciate that. I kind of talked about that on my own podcast the other day, and I love doing it. I was a huge prospects nerd even before I got into this. I kind of told this story. We're gonna tell this story on one of my podcasts. I think I started following prospects in 07, 08. I joined this like high stakes dynasty league. It was like 100 players deep. It was $1,000 buy-in. I was like, man, I need to win this. So just since then, I've always loved kind of prospect prognostication, and then obviously turning into what I am now, a few years later, to be able to talk to scouts and actually get the ground floor info and be the one writing the reports. And I always want to reiterate and remind people that I'm not a scout. Everything that I write in those pieces is coming from, people inside organizations that are outside the Blue Jays organization, obviously opinions on players from inside the organization, coaches that work with them, things like that. I obviously have my own opinions on players. I have no problem giving them, but those reports are written off, experts, the people that watch these players for a living and evaluate them for a living. So, that's the cool part. It's being able to get that info on the ground floor and then, obviously order it in my subjective ranking. And I talk about that in my latest pod. It's, don't argue with me about 12 versus 14. Like, if you can put whatever player you want in that kind of subjective order. It's about the meat of the info in the blurbs.
Truly, and you may not be a scout, but you're a hell of a researcher. And let's start with the farm system here, because there's not a heck of a lot else going on. The Jays farm system, according to Baseball America, the last year has not been ranked overly high. Although they did just release a couple months ago that the Blue Jays pitching prospects in development is actually ranked 6th in baseball right now, which is definitely encouraging. My question for you is the farm really as shallow with position players as maybe it's being framed as?
Interesting take. I didn't see that Baseball America piece. I did see something, but was that the analytically driven one where they were 6th? Okay. Yeah, that's a little bit different. So when you look at kind of the strengths of this farm system, to me, position players. You look at my list from number 6 through number 9, Leo Jimenez. Going to be the everyday shortstop in Buffalo. He's also on my breakouts piece. Absolutely love this guy. I think he has a breakout season in him. I've been maybe saying that for 3 years, so I'm going to triple down on it and think it's coming this year. But there's some really good markers in terms of the power. And the interesting part is he's a sure shot shortstop, which obviously has value. And that's another reminder about my prospects list where, the subjective nature can kind of come in. And it's not a fancy list. This is based on real life value. If you can play shortstop full time in the big leagues, you're going to get a hell of a bump versus somebody that, is a platoon kind of corner guy who doesn't give you much value. And, that would be different in a fantasy list. Like Davis Schneider's 8th. It's a big point of contention on my podcast. Had a bunch of players. I actually had internal people. And, this is the interesting part. And when I run my list by, certain people that I trust, they say, David Schneider's too low. He's raked in the big leagues. And I'm like, well, okay. still my list. I can do what I want, but the fantasy value of that, if you ranked him, it would be totally differently. So you got Leo Jimenez at 6, you got Addison Barger at 7, you got Davis Schneider at 8, you got Alan Roden at 9, you got Damiano Palmagiani, one of my faves, who I could probably, if you mention who would go Davis Schneider from this prospect group this year in the second half, could be him, mashing lefties, and then Spencer Horwitz at 15. So that's a real nice layer of depth that the Blue Jays have in the upper levels that not a
That's
lot
the
of
thing
teams
too.
have.
Upper levels, right? Like these are guys that are on the verge.
They're ready. Most of these guys are baked and ready to contribute. Are there going to be growing pains? Absolutely. They're not going to all come up and be Davis Schneider. And look, Davis Schneider isn't going to be that this year either. He's not going to slug 600. I'm sorry. Expectations need to be kept in check a little bit. So it's interesting. I think when you look at the tiers of this system, it's Ricky Tiedemann alone, obviously. It's Orelvis alone, 2. Then I got a group of, 3 young guys that are kind of hopefully the future in the Blue Jays' eyes in, Namala, Barriera, and Bonilla. And then you have those upper level, kind of depth guys. So I think, not a ton of just blue chippers, but in terms of depth, I think they have a really nice layer. And that's where you look at this system and say, yeah, I've said the same thing. I don't know where Baseball America has them. 20 to 30, very subjective, bottom third. They've got a potential ace and some nice talent that everybody has. But I think when you look at the strength, I think it's actually upper level. And then interestingly enough, not enough pitching. The reason I think Baseball America has them, I didn't see that piece, is some of the analytics guys in the lower levels, like Fernando Perez. I think they're very high on. I absolutely love this guy. He's ramped way up my list. Nolan Perry, some guys like that. So, it's really tough to kind of look at this system and say, a year from now, you may look at it totally differently if there's a few breakouts, because there is talent, but right now it's definitely bottom third.
I mean, this is what people forget too, is that the prospect rankings is such a crapshoot. Like, honestly, 1 year can make
Yeah.
all the difference in the world, depending on how guys are developing and so on and so forth. I know you did mention Arjun Namala, and I was curious on your thoughts on him. I know he's 18. I know he's raw. I know he's young. I know there's a lot of development left. Plays shortstop, plays third base. Where are you at on Arjun? Should Blue Jays fans be excited? And can you see him sticking at shortstop?
Um, early. Look, I think he's probably a third baseman in the end, but yeah, it's way too early to kind of say those things. I'm old enough to remember Corey Seager. He was never going to be a shortstop, always a third baseman. That's just how it is. You look at Manny Machado. I mean, the guy could have played shortstop, signed as a third baseman, now he's a third baseman. But look, I think he's a left side guy. The arm's enough. It's going to be the bat, right? If he stays at shortstop, it's because the bat is so good that you can live kind of with the Bo Bichette defense, which is
Okay, I was just going to make that comparison. Yeah.
yeah. And that's what you do. You have to have the elite bat to be able to carry that. And if you're just not good enough defensively, he's going to shift third, and then you got to hit for a whole lot of power. And I think that's where, the excitement comes with him. The guy's an explosive rotator. He's got a very, very unique swing. And I'm very interested. He's one of my, pref list guys to go see in spring training to see just what his swing looks like. Because there's a little bit of a bat wrap, a lot of moving parts. But man, when he barrels it up, it goes. And that was the interesting part. Only, I believe, and don't quote me because I don't have the list in front of me, there was only 13 batted ball events this year for him. Obviously, when he signed, just a very small sample size. But the exit velocities weren't what people expected. So really, he's going to be, closely watched early in the year. And you got to keep the strikeouts in check. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's some growing pains early, just based on how raw he is. They signed him for 750,000 under slot. It sounds like he was, falling to the second round if the Blue Jays didn't pop him there. So, huge upside, but just so raw. So, it could go one of any ways early in the season. And if he comes out like we kind of just talked about, if he comes out and he's raking in the complex league. I think they'll keep him back until the complex league, which is starting a little bit earlier this year, which is helping teams. So they won't need to send him to single A. And I think they learned a little bit with Tucker Toman last year, not to push guys a little bit too early. So I think Bonilla and Namala will stay back to the complex league. And if he comes out raking in the complex league, people are going to probably have him in the top 100 conversation.
Sure. I mean, let them force their way to the next level. I think that's definitely the way to do it. I know you mentioned Alan Roden. He's been on the show, and one thing about the kid, I was really impressed with what was between his ears. I mean, the guy is
He wants to
for a
be a history
21.
teacher, I think, or something. That's what
Yeah,
I heard.
like literally for a 21-year-old dude, I was like, I think I'm intellectually out of my out of my wheelhouse here. Like the kid was embarrassing me. Like it was so impressive. I'm curious your opinion on Alan Roden, and the reason I bring him up, I know you've got him ranked ninth, but he is kind of projected as the one guy out of those prospects that could possibly, I know he'd need a big spring, but he could possibly break camp with the team. There is a spot on the roster as of right now, anyways, where he could fill. What are your thoughts on Alan Roden, and do you like what you see out of his bat?
I love what I see of his bat. I mean, I feel bad. Like last year, he was prospect number 51. He didn't even make the list, which is just shows you how ridiculous this is. Because I wanted to put him on, and I learn lessons every year, right? Because I had way too many kind of lower level, breakout type, kind of international free agent guys, and Roden should have been on there. Clearly, I'm just glad I tweeted him. I said he's 51. I wanted to put him on. But yeah, now he's 9. Great season. Just like, so it's interesting. He doesn't have the highest upside, which is obviously why he was picked where he was.
Mm-hmm.
He's a lefty hitter that gets by with a great hit tool, a great approach to the plate, the ability to take a walk. He's a left-handed hitter. He looks like he's going to have a tremendously valuable kind of on-base kind of package. Split camp on where he plays defensively, and sorry, maybe not where he plays defensively, but how much of an impact he has defensively. There are some people that think he's a great right fielder. There are some people think he's an average right fielder. There are some people think he can dabble in center. Just a very split camp. As far as breaking camp with the team, I've never reported that. I've seen the reports. I don't think there's any chance.
Mm-hmm.
The guy has not taken a AAA at bat yet. I think he's the first layer of depth if there's an outfield injury. If he's performing in AAA, I think Addison Barger will have a say in that as well. Davis Schneider being able to stand in left field a little bit. I think Roden's still half season away from being ready. Attacking AAA pitching with the ABS system up there. But great pick. And it's just interesting how that draft class has turned out, 2 years later now, or a year and a half later is, I had, Dowdy and Toman, way up the
Yeah.
list last year. Josh Kasevich, those are the 3 bats they took before Roden, and now Roden's ahead of all of them. So
Yeah.
there you go with prospect prognostication, but, very good, on base hit tool package. Just not the huge upside because of the athletic ability. But you mentioned very smart. I asked a couple of people this winter, who should I have on my podcast? Like who's interesting? And Alan Roden was the name that kept coming back. So glad you had him on. I'll have to go check that one out.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great cast. Before we move on to the big club here, Scotty, we just mentioned Davis Schneider. Obviously, he's going to be given his chance to play full time with this team, or at least be a very big contributing member to the team. When you look at the prospects that you've just ranked out of those top 50, if you were to make a bet as to who will be the next Davis Schneider, and by that I don't mean breaking all MLB records for starts, I just mean like an actual contributor who sticks with the team and kind of forces his way in. Do you have a name or two that you'd put a little bit of dough on as to the next guy to
I
be
kind of
that
just
guy?
answered your question, unfortunately. Damiano Palmagiani.
Okay, yeah.
Palmagiani and Leo Jimenez. Look, Palmagiani crushes left-handed pitching. Look at my 14-15. Palmagiani and Spencer Horwitz. If that's a DH platoon at some point this year, based on injuries, based on performance, that would not shock me one bit. And not going to lie, I think that could be a fairly productive one. So this guy could come up and play a role against left-handed pitching. He's one of the best fastball hitters in the system, which obviously allows you a lot of leeway in the major leagues. If you can't hit a fastball, especially a high fastball, you're going to have a hole that, can get exposed pretty quickly. And we actually saw that with Davis, and he was pretty open. The high fastball had given him troubles kind of throughout his career, and he had really worked to close that up. And he obviously did at times. And then there were times where he was exposed with the strikeouts. And, you swing through high fastballs, you become way more susceptible to the slider off the plate, and it's tough. So, those two guys, and Jimenez, I think is a layer of depth that's excellent, because I think he can come up with an injury. And, maybe, well, we'll see how the offseason shakes out or whatever. But I think he could be a better option than a Santiago Espinal or something like that at short. And I'm super interested to see how much power Leo shows at AAA. I think his career high is 7 or 8 last year. Seen this guy take BP, man. This guy can hit 15 or 20. And I don't know if I'm irrationally high, but those two guys are the guys that, I wouldn't be surprised if both of them impact the team in some way, just due to injuries.
That's exciting, man. I know we had Palmagiani on the show as well, and he was cracking us up. He's a bit of a clown. I kind of got a kick out of him because he kept, we were teasing him about how you got to say his name with the Palmagiani, right? He was just
How did I
very,
do? I'm trying.
yeah. No, it's very, he's very Italian and then a Canadian kid. So obviously we're rooting for him. All
I've
right,
just been calling him Dom P. So I try to shorten it
very
up.
safe. It's very safe, Scotty. It's the way to go. All right. Let's take a left turn here and talk the Toronto Blue Jays, the big league club. I know the moves that have been made so far have not excited the fan base overly, right? Whenever you raise the floor, it's about the least sexy thing you could possibly do. And I know that there's another shoe or two to drop here. There has to be. But when you look at this club right now as is, what are your thoughts?
Well, look, here's the thing. I agree. There's a lot of offseason left. I don't want to date this, but I tweeted about Jorge Soler today. I'm assuming by the time this comes out, because I wouldn't be surprised if he signs today, that he'll be off the board. So there's still talent. When you look at Jorge Soler, then you pivot to the JD Martinez, Justin Turner group, on a short-term deal. I think they could be very productive, pieces in terms of DH, potentially a little third base, second base, first base for Turner. So there's still talent out there. Once you get past those guys, you're into Jock Petersons, you're into Brandon Belts if he decides he's playing this year, you're into Joey Vottos, you're into Tommy Phams. So there's a lot of platoon guys that I think, the Blue Jays are kind of just waiting out. There's a little bit of money to spend. There's obviously holes. They need a bat that can, rotate through the outfield spots with Dalton Varsho, Kevin Kiermaier. Way too many at bats for them last year against left-handed pitching. They need a right-handed outfielder. Obviously, that is going to factor into the DH spot. I think if you sign a JD Martinez, obviously that's a full-time DH. I think that'd be a great signing, 1-year deal. Very productive player. Never forget that the Blue Jays love exit velocities. Any player that has a high exit velocity, they're going to be in on free agency. I call it the Kendry Morales effect from a ton of years ago. But that was the first time I realized what this regime kind of had. What they were into and things like that. You get those guys and they're investing in them, hoping they pop and have that career year. So look, I think I don't think this team's good enough right now. I've been saying since the day they got booted in Minnesota, though. It's all about internal improvements, man. Like the pitching staff, we know how good that is. They still need some depth because they're not going to stay as healthy as last year. But the difference between this team being a 93-win team and winning 86 games is our Vladdy, George Springer, Dalton Varsho, Alejandro Kirk, Are those four guys what they were last year, or are they what their ceiling is? If Vladdy
Mhm.
comes out and is an MVP type player, that ties this lineup together. If George Springer gets back to hitting for power, that dried up last year, great leadoff hitter. If Alejandro Kirk is, hitting 310 and, driving guys in from the 5 hole or whatever it is, completely different team.
Add a
There's
healthy
so
Danny Jansen to that would be huge too.
Yeah, that's the thing. Danny Jansen, if you look at his numbers and take them all from the last 3 years, he's been one of the most productive catchers in baseball, and people completely overlook that guy.
His
There's
last
enough talent there.
162, Scott, he's literally, you put his numbers next to Marcus Semien, and they're the same numbers. And I know that drives people crazy when I say that. They get all furious. But, like, that's just the case. Like, the games he's played, he's Marcus
Yeah.
Semien at the plate.
I know Danny Jansen better than probably anybody on this team because I love going and talking to him. And every time he gets hurt, the disappointment on his face, he goes, dude, things are just clicking. And it's like, yeah, man, they've been clicking for 3 years when you're healthy,
Yeah.
and everybody knows that. And that's the thing. So there's enough talent on this team. The internal improvements are the absolute key. And I know everyone hates to hear that because spending money, it's flashy. Oh, you got to go spend money. No, you don't. You have to spend money in the correct ways. And
Yes.
waiting out markets is totally fine. Putting together platoon situations for $6 million here, $5 million there is totally fine. That's how you win baseball games. You do not need to win the offseason. You do not need to be on, I'll shout out my guys, TSN 1050. You don't need them talking about you. I go on and I'm called the voice of reason on my own radio station because they want to complain about it. And you know what? You can build baseball teams in different ways. If Vladdy
Mm-hmm.
and Bo are MVP type players, George Springer, Dalton Varsho, Alejandro Kirk, Danny Jansen, if they are, the type of supporting cast that they can be with their ceilings, and then you add in a couple more pieces, it's going to be a team that is in playoff contention right down to the wire, like we've seen over the last couple of years, and that's all you can ask for. Is this going to be a juggernaut, LA Dodgers, Houston Astros team right now? No, but in July, if all these guys are performing and Vladdy's hitting 320 with 36 bombs in August, they're going to be in the mix.
Shit, give me career numbers for most of the guys you just mentioned, and I'll be happy. Like, last year was such an anomaly with so many guys having such down years. So fingers crossed on that front. I know you mentioned the DH market and just how slow it's been. And I know we kind of saw the first shoe drop in Rhys Hoskins going to the Brewers there, 2 years, 32 million. So he got that extra year. And no one
Yeah,
thought Hoskins would get
stunning.
that second year. Do
I was
you
actually just
think,
having a conversation about it this morning. It's amazing.
yeah, so do you think term is part of what's holding this up? Like, are some of these guys waiting on 2 years?
Yeah, some of them are waiting on 3. Solaire's waiting on 3,
Mm,
which I believe he's going to get because he's looked at kind of in more of the Gurriel camp than the Teoscar camp.
okay.
Gurriel got 342. Sorry, I'm pulling up my top 50 free agents list right now because I've got it nicely here with see like a ton of talent still available on the
There
market.
is. It's wild.
I've got Snell 4, Bellinger 5, Chapman 6, Montgomery 9. Obviously, the Jays really aren't interested in those guys unless you think Chapman's coming back. I don't know about Bellinger at this point. That's a really weird market. And then you get into the Solaires, the Tim Andersons, who I love, Justin Turner, JD Martinez, Jock Peterson, Whit Merrifield still out there, Tommy Pham. Yeah, lots of talent. So look, I think it's just a domino offseason that is led by kind of the top of the market. And we all know the Scott Boras effect. He drives a lot of this stuff. And yeah, it's just I don't think the money has been there for the supporting guys that we knew how bad the kind of the position player market was. And I think teams have just kind of looked at it and said, we're not all that interested in these guys. We're just going to wait it out. And a lot of these
Mhm.
guys are going to end up taking 1-year deals. And yeah, I don't think it's about the AAV in terms of kind of what they're waiting on. Yeah, it's will a team add an extra year? And I think agents are just very comfortable, and you've got a lot of veteran guys that have kind of made money that are just comfortable waiting into February.
Well, it is
Sucks.
interesting. It is interesting because you did mention Scott Boras, and then you just kind of gave the top remaining free agents, and the top four on your list are all Boras clients, right? How
Yep.
long do you think the Scott Boras clients hold out for? Do you think it's February? Do you think it's March? Like, it's starting to feel like there's a real battle of wills kind of going on between the Boras Corp and the rest of the organization, still waiting on some of these guys, Montgomery, Snell, Chappie, Bellinger. You just mentioned them all. Do you think these guys are still going to get the mega deals that were kind of projected? Or do you think that there's a reality that might hit with a couple of them where the market's just not there and they might need to take, like you said, maybe a 1 year deal? Like, is it even possible that we see a Matt Chapman or a Cody Bellinger roll it over one more year and try again?
Lot to unpack there. Where do I start? Look, I'm not going to make a prediction on the Boris clients because I watched Bryce Harper and Manny Machado sign in the middle of like after spring training started. And if you would have told me like at the beginning of that offseason that, these mega stars that, baseball kind of rides their offseason on, kind of the news making machine would wait that long, I would have never predicted it. So they'll sign when he's comfortable, I guess. So the 1 year thing is interesting. Bellinger, no, I think the Cubs have a real nice offer that he's and he fits there. They're obviously trying to win again. The Chapman one's interesting. So if you go back to my podcast, I actually did it with Gregor Chisholm from the Star, my boy. We taped that sometime in November. Yeah, maybe like November 1st. It was right before the top 50 came out, or right after. I kind of said, I said, what are the chances Chapman's market craters and he's got to circle back and take a 1 year? And I even looked at it at the time and I said, like, man, like, could he accept the qualifying offer, like, based on how bad his last, half of the season was? So I'm not going to rule that out that he just goes, in, February 12th, he goes, fuck it. I don't know if I can swear on your podcast,
Oh,
but
yeah. Fucking go for it.
thanks. Fuck. Good to fucking hear. It would not surprise me if February 12th he just said, you know what, the offers aren't there. Fuck it. I'm gonna try to go out and crush it. Not have a qualifying offer attached next year, and make my money there. Like, so I reported kind of in a roundabout way in a column that MLB trade rumors picked up, and I can kind of update it. He was offered 4 or 5 years for 100 million that he turned down. So he turned down 6 years, 120 million from the Blue Jays last year. So that is his best shit. Like, I've already turned that down. Is he getting offered that right now? I'm not truly sure he is. So in a roundabout way to answer your question, I would not be surprised if in the end he takes a 1 year and is very motivated and betting on himself. He's the type. He's the type.
There is a big hole at the hot corner with the Toronto Blue Jays. Can you see a scenario where, as long as they beat the qualifying offer, maybe a 1 year, $24-25 million deal, him circling back and donning the Blue Jays uni again?
Yeah, 100%. I could actually even see a multi-year deal with it backloaded a little bit. I could see them saying, 12 million this year, escalate that to kind of save a little bit. I could totally see that. I think the Blue Jays are kind of laying in wait on that one and would love to have him back because analytically, the defense is special, man.
I
And
know.
and fans soured on him last year because they watched him pop balls up all the time and swing through high fastballs, and that's what you're gonna get. But you know what? You might also get that 1 year where he doesn't swing through those high fastballs and they end up in the seats and he's playing elite defense. I'd love to have him back if I'm
I
running the team.
I also would love to have him back for all the reasons you just said. And honestly, I'm a big believer in large sample sizes. And once you turn Matty Chapman's baseball card over and you look at his career average, I think it's far more likely those are the numbers we see than the last 5 months of last year, which I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was disgusting. I hated watching it. And I think that's why the fan base turned so heavily on him, is just man, when you're in the middle of August and you're watching a guy swing through 92-mile-an-hour dead center fastballs, it breaks your soul a little bit. But I think that the chances of Chapman being what he was last year is far more unlikely than what you would see normally as his career average. Anyways, I've talked
So
this to death on.
hold on. You say all that, and I got to pull it up now.
Yeah.
Super tough watching him. Totally agree. Let's see. What was he worth? F4 was.
Oh no, 4.
4 on the nose. Hold on, I'm pulling it up here.
No, double check here.
3.5.
Okay.
4.2 the year before. So you asked me if this team is better or worse a few questions ago. Like, they're worse without 3.5
Yes.
WAR in your lineup. Yes, it comes a lot from defensive value, but do y'all remember watching Kevin Biggio there a couple of years ago? And do you remember how different it was when Matt Chapman made every fucking play, and he even made the plays that he wasn't supposed to make? Like, you need a little perspective here. And like you said, with the bat,
part of the reason the pitching staff was so dominant was Matt Chapman. Like, truly, right?
Yeah. So like that's the funny thing with perception, right? Like 2 years ago, everyone's like, "Oh my God, they need to improve defensively. They need to get better at the little things." Then they go get better at the little things, and they fucking can't hit the ball over the wall anymore. They pitch better than any team in baseball from front to back. And so I said this last year. I don't know where I say anything anymore, but I just said, like, winning 3-1 games is just not sexy. Like, that's not good enough for people. They'd rather go back to 2021 where it was and win 9-5. But back then everyone's like, oh God, the bullpen's gonna blow all these games. So it's like,
and they
what
did.
do you want? It's like, what do you want?
Yeah.
Pitching and defense wins in postseason. I will take what last year's team looked like and just add a little more offensive punch, and I would feel very, very good. Like, look, we all watched that Minnesota series. I watched Vladdy's ball go to the wall. Fucking John Schneider after the game, he's like, and it's true. A couple balls fall in, maybe they get through there, but not enough offense last year, not enough punch. But it's not just adding from the outside. Not enough punch came from Springer, came from Kirk, came from Vladdy. So,
speaking of pitching, Josh Hader, probably the biggest bullpen piece on the market. I think it's safe to say lands with the Astros. And I mean, my God, that Houston bullpen is just nasty at this point. But the Blue Jays have a pretty decent pen in their own right. Would you rank the Blue Jays bullpen top 3 in the AL, top 5?
for sure, top 5. Top 3, I'd have to think about.
And would you like to see one more piece added to that pen?
I think they did. I think
Yariel, right?
Rodriguez
Yariel's the guy, right?
Based on everything I heard about him earlier in the offseason, when I kind of outlined they were interested in him, they gave him a promise to start. The contract looks like a back-end starter, which means, he's going to get a chance. I've heard of these, Shun Yamaguchi is one. He wanted a promise to start. They gave him totally different, kind of financial dynamic. I think he was like 2 years, 7 million, like, just a totally different dynamic. But I think when you look at the realistic nature of what he could provide you this year, based on how much he's pitched over the last couple of years, I think he ends up being a very vital bullpen piece by the end of the season, and then you're transitioning him into the rotation for 2025. So I think he's the piece. I think you can always add a little bit of depth, and I've got my list is deep, and there's tons of guys out there. Like, look, go get Ryan Stanek, go get Brandon Hughes is an interesting lefty. I think a lefty could be nice. Jake Diekman pitched for the Rays pretty well last year. So yeah, I think you can add something. I think it's a good bullpen. I think Rodriguez would really add another element. I heard he was up to 96, 97, 98, in one inning spurts. That could be really the tie-in. We can also go back to my prospect list. I think there's some guys that could really help there. So look, Romano, Romano, Swanson, Chad Green. I think that could be a dominant trio back there. Tim Meza doesn't get the love that he deserves just because he doesn't throw that hard. It's health, man. I think that's the thing. If you look at this club this year, that scares me a little bit. The pitching staff last year was so healthy, and I don't know if lightning strikes twice again. The last time I remember that happening was 2016. The Sanchez, Stroman, that rotation stayed healthy, and they won 89 games and just squeaked into the playoffs. Last year, look, if you lose Kevin Gausman for a month and a half last year to an oblique strain,
you're done.
Probably miss the playoffs.
Yeah.
So that's where you could never have enough depth. I think it's good enough. Yeah, like top five for sure. It's a play, it's a playoff bullpen. I'm not sure. Like, I would always look at Cleveland and Tampa. I don't know who's there, but they're always going to have good bullpens. So, yeah, I didn't think they needed to invest. I think Rodriguez right now is, the name that kind of people are looking at as a starter, but just with the innings limit, eventually when it matters, he'll be in the pen.
You are literally in my head right now saying all my worries out loud, because I am very excited about this starting pitching staff, Scotty, but I am terrified about it as well for a couple of reasons. The injuries you just mentioned and how healthy they were last year. Number two, Chris Bassett, Yusei Kikuchi, career years. Whenever you see career years, like it's a scary thing to put all those eggs right back in that basket, right? And although there's always surprises, and that's the thing, because if you were to have told me, go back 1 year from now, and you were to ask me, Scott, Alek Manoah has a 5.5 ERA, isn't even on the team by the end of the year, do you think they make the playoffs? I would have laughed in your face and said, absolutely not. And I would have thought it was an injury. But so who knows where they are?
Technically, it kind of was.
It kind of was. So speaking of the big cat, what are your thoughts on Alek Manoah? Do you have a sense that there is a strain in that relationship with the Jays? Is he just doing his own thing at this point? Or do you think that there is a real possibility of him maybe not even returning to 2022? But my God, I'll take 160 innings and a 4 ERA out of Alek Manoah going into 2024. Is that possible?
Shit. I would love that.
Yeah,
I think that's totally possible. The curious case of Alek Manoah. I said that numerous times on TV last year, because look, even walking through it in my own head, there were so many variables, there were so many things that happened, there were so many factors at play, and honestly, I think I know the story more than most people, and I don't still have the whole story. Let's run through this. Comes into camp off the great year, whatever. And I'll give you the hindsight too. Comes into camp off a great year, whatever. In hindsight, definitely, sorry, my phone's blowing up here. Definitely some conditioning stuff. I think he would admit that to you. He probably didn't work as hard as he needed to in the off season, coming off a Cy year. Fuck, I might not either. So that happened. Then there's some stuff with his shoulder. Nothing super serious, but big workload. I talked to other pitchers and they're like, fuck, you pitched a lot. That you came in tired, whatever, conditioning wasn't great. Tried to gut through it. Didn't really, complain about too much. We saw it early. The stuff was down. It's April, he's in St. Louis, it's cold. Remember Bassett stuff was down. Everyone's talking about that.
I think the innings too isn't mentioned enough. Like if you look back on 2021, he pitched 110 innings, and then with that wild card appearance in 2022, he pitched 200 innings. Like that in a league where 20 to 30% increases is the max you wish to see out of a starting pitcher. He was so far over that. It's wild.
Yeah. And people kind of overlooked that because coming out of West Virginia, he was looked at, this big body guy. Like the big guys are just supposed to be able to just haul innings. Tanner Roark, what did he call himself? The diesel
the
bus or some
diesel
shit?
engine, yeah.
Yeah. Like, and that's the thing. So if you had a skinny guy, you're like, oh, you're always worried about the Chris Sale types. Oh, no, it's a guy's arm is a guy's arm. And yeah, so clearly in hindsight, a lot of stuff. So you get through that. There's already some things going on. He goes into St. Louis, gets fucking shelled. You got to remember, this is still a kid in the relative scheme of things that hasn't experienced much failure. Struggles. One start, okay. Starts snowballing. So this is where it becomes kind of tricky and subjective because a lot of people were just like, he just couldn't handle that, didn't know how to handle it. So conditioning's not great, shoulders barking a little bit, confidence is down, mechanics are completely out of whack, stuff is down. The one thing I kept going back to was his average fastball dropped below the average, or his fastball dropped below the average major league average. Once you get below the major league average, the slash line, just takes off. So I kept saying until the stuff gets back, I don't think it's going to get much better. Maybe he's a good pitcher, which is underrated. But when the stuff was down, the mechanics were out of whack. He wasn't commanding anything anymore. So everything was just sour. So then they try to send him down. They want to send him down. Everyone agrees. There were some things worked in about when he comes back up. It wasn't, hey, he comes back up when he's ready, when he's pitching well. It was more worked in that, he comes back up at this time. In hindsight, probably not the best plan that they devised. Should have had him, just when he's ready. Mm-hmm. So then obviously comes back up. That's okay. Struggles a bit. Obviously, they send him back down. This is where the relationship strained. And to answer your question, yes, there's absolutely a strain in relationship. Time can heal wounds. I think the offseason has maybe, helped that a bit. But I did report at the winter meetings, there was trade interest in him. A lot of people I talked to thought the Soto package, he would have been probably involved in that. Maybe not as a headliner, but as a piece. And that's the tricky part because there's not a lot of trade value right now if you're the Blue Jays. Yeah, if you're the Pittsburgh Pirates, call every day and try to get Alek Manoah because why would you not? So all of those factors leads me to right here where the Blue Jays aren't going to give him away. It is obviously late January. Still a lot of offseason to go, so I wouldn't say that they wouldn't trade him. But right now it looks like he's going to compete and come in. The relationship, a few months has maybe repaired itself a little bit with some time away. The question is, though, he's going to come in wanting to be the fifth starter. If he doesn't win the fifth starter job, then you're back into the relationship thing. And look, to be totally honest, there were arbitration things at play last year, which is why, he went down, didn't come back up. Everything about the relationship I needed to hear was unsaid when every single member of the organization showed up in Minnesota. They flew player development people in, minor leaguers to support the team. No Alek Manoah. So everyone's seen the social media stuff. A motivated Alek Manoah is a good thing. Looks like he's working hard. We'll see what the stuff looks like in spring training. It could go any number of ways. I think if he gets back, he's pitching well, looking good in spring training. He's going to be the fifth starter. Uriel, as we talked about, is in the bullpen. The relationship would be great. Well, he's back on track. Any sort of hiccups, we'll see. And if it breaks, 2 weeks from now that Alek Manoah is part of a package to get a big bat, would not be surprised either. But selling low on him just based on the ceiling, is obviously really scary.
Especially with the value attached to starting pitchers with control. I mean, Lucas Giolito got almost $40 million for 2 years. I mean, you can't tell me Alek Manoah doesn't have value, but he is at about as low a value as he could be at right now. Before I let you go, Scotty, and honestly, man, I am so thrilled that you made some time here and hopped on with us. I know it was last minute, but I really, really appreciate it. I know you're busy. I know your phone's blowing up. So let's end on this. Top 50 prospect rankings. Number 1, Ricky T. Obviously, Blue Jays fans have been excited about this kid for going on 2 years now.
Yep.
Does he make his major league debut in 2024? And if you're going to give on a scale of 1 to 10 how much of an impact he is on the 2024 season, I know this is complete speculation and just a guess, where do you rank, 10 being the highest impact, 1 being almost not at all?
Yes, he makes his debut. Absolutely, health permitting. Obviously, we saw that last year. Any sort of injury in spring training really sets any sort of pitcher back and completely changes the timing and the outlook of things. You know, he was nasty in the Arizona Fall League. The stuff looked great. So health wise, in a great position. Comes into camp. He's going to start in AAA. There's going to be stories about, you know, he can win the 5th starter spot. No. Oh, that's just us being bored, or other people being bored. So
yeah,
like I'm guilty
and
of it too
service time, right?
sometimes.
Like, why would they do that?
Well, yeah, and it just doesn't make any sense. And you know, I'll tell you why. And the last piece of development here, and you know, it's in my prospect piece, and I've written it for 2 years now because he didn't get over the hump last year. He's never completed more than 5 innings in a start. He's never thrown more than 84 pitches. So he's got to figure that out at the AAA level where he got to last year. And you know, the timeline is going to be really interesting. And I walked through this because it's a long-winded thing. I wrote it, but I walked through it on my podcast as well. This is the first time I'm ever going to predict that a top-end starting pitching prospect is probably going to be broken in the bullpen. But when you look at just what they're going to do with him, and their MO over the last few years as an organization, you know, hasn't been to send him out and go 5-6 early and then back him off. It's been he'll probably go 3 innings, 3 innings, 4 innings, 4 innings, get through the cold weather. He hasn't thrown more than 78 innings in a season. So he's got 100, 110 innings in him. They're not going to mess around with that, as we just talked about with Manoah. So you got those innings. You got to get him developed to the point where in the minor leagues, he's going 5-6 and turning lineups over and getting to 90 plus pitches. Then you kind of got to look at how many innings you got left. You got to look at where your rotation is if they need him. You know, he's up in June, contributing every 5th day until you start to get to, you know, the limit there. But if you don't need him in the rotation, maybe he comes up for a couple starts. Man, Ricky teed him in July, August, September, going two plus innings out of the pen, pumping 97, 98 from the left side.
Aaron
You just talked
Sanchez,
about
2015 2.0, basically. I know
yeah,
Sanchez is a righty, but yeah.
Yeah, no, 100. Like that's the thing. Like Sanchez was nasty back then. Like, you know, 97-mile-an-hour sinkers just sawing people off. And you know, that's kind of what you can look at. And obviously the with where the club is, you know, contention wise, you're trying to win. So to break him in, kind of like Yariel, say you got 100 innings out of both of them. You know, you use them in the pen. Tiedemann has to develop in the minor leagues, get through some of the you know, into 90 plus pitches. But when you look at realistically what kind of impact he could have as a starter, minimal probably. As a bullpen piece, I mean, I'll go with like a 6, 7. Like I think he could be one of those guys where this might be aging myself a little bit, but like prime before he was a closer, Octavio Dotel.
Yes, please.
Like if he comes in, like I'll give you like a stat line that Ricky could produce. If he comes up at the trade deadline, they put him in the pen, he's getting in him, or 25 innings. Like this guy could be like 14 strikeouts per 9. You know, kind of just wherever John Schneider wants to use him. That's what I envision. And then kind of the same way, next offseason, you go in, you lose Kikuchi to free agency. You got Yariel and Ricky T healthy, building up to 130. There's your 4 or 5 starters in 2025, health permitting. So big year for him. Big year to just stay healthy, get through this development piece, and then you can start being super, super excited. But as I wrote, you know, as I talked about on my podcast, the Nate Pearson example is very, very real. So he couldn't get through that point, 5'6", to, you know, stay healthy and sequence and build up enough. I think Ricky has a better chance, but it's only because we've seen what happened with Nate. So hindsight's 2020. So super interesting. I think he plays a big role, health permitting. It's just limited innings.
Love that picture you painted. That would be great to see Yariel and him kind of logging that kind of innings and contributing in the back end of that bullpen. That's exciting stuff. Scotty, thank you so very much for joining me, man. And next time I'm in Toronto performing, tickets on me, buddy. I look forward to the next time that our paths cross, and maybe we can have a beer together. All the best, bud.
I hope it happens. Like I said before we started this, I will come out to a comedy show. I've actually been trying to get out to a comedy show here locally. It's a great night out.
We'll
Every
make it
time we're in
happen.
New York, we try to go to like one of the great comedy clubs. So I'd love to come see you, and anytime I'll come on this show.
I look forward to it, brother. Take care of yourself. All the best. And hopefully next time we have you on, there's actual news to talk about.
Can't promise, man.
I can't promise anything. All right, buddy. Take care. Thanks again. Cheers.
Anytime.